died out of very sad and harrowing tales of human loss at a rapid and traumatic scale. Many citizens who succumbed to the virus were public servants such as Brother George Wilson, former principal of the St. John's Christian Secondary School.
And right where I sit in front of me is this seed in the pod, so low to the ground, just to pick it. Pick it, take out the seed with the mace, put it in my bucket, and then drop the pot to the ground. So you must have taken a rest from picking up. I still could be picking and gathering. And yet for all, black men don't want to work, especially the younger men. How terrible it is, how a young country as Grenada going to grow, get rich and live in prosperity. The wind blowing now and the train down, new seed on the ground with a pot. Truly, Grenada is the Isle of Spice.
And young Rihanna Bruno, an eloquent second-year student at the T.A. Marisho Community College. Some other deaths, not COVID-related, also occurred last week. Retired public servant and daughter of the parish of St. David, Meryl Forsyth, died on September 11th. She was remembered for her non-partisan love of country, who continued to serve Grenada as the coordinator of the Mediation Center long after her retirement from the public service. Also deceased are two physicians from the western side of the island. Dr. Pete Varma, who immigrated to Grenada from India in the 1980s, called the island home, and pediatrician Dr. Darvel Ray, who only returned to Grenada in 2015 after obtaining his medical degree from the People's Republic of China. May they all rest in peace, and may their memories be a blessing. We welcome our guests, Pastor Stanford Simon, tourism entrepreneur Randall Robinson, Herman Hall, publisher of the Everybody's magazine, former Grenadian public servant Carleen Batiste, and physician Dr. Mondell George. We thank you for joining us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Sunday edition of the Bubb Report. We are meeting under some very somber circumstances this week. I've heard some very difficult and sad stories emanating from Grenada. There seems to be a spirit of fear that's enveloping the country at this time. That's natural. I can speak to my own personal experience with respect to COVID-19 here in the Washington, D.C. area. Last year, during our significant spike of cases, the kinds of anxiety and the kinds of mental health experiences that people had. And so I can empathize with the national community in Grenada at this time. This is not an easy time. And all I ask for is that we be kind. Over the last week, I've seen so much vitriol and so much anger spewed towards our healthcare workers, for example, spewed against people who are on the front line, just doing their jobs as professionals. But of course, we want to take this time to also extend our deepest sympathies to those who died from COVID and other underlying conditions last week. We want to pay tributes to Grenada's frontline workers, the doctors, the nurses, the orderlies, the cleaners, and other ancillary staff in the health system of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, who do tremendous work under some very difficult circumstances. This is indeed a very difficult time for our frontline workers, and we here at the Bubb Report extend our solidarity with this particular group of public servants. And on that note, I wish to welcome my first guest, Dr. Mondell George. Dr. George, welcome to the report. Unfortunately, we are meeting under these circumstances, but it is good to have you here, sir.
The pleasure is all mine, Dr. Brooke.
Yes, Dr. George, one of the reasons why we wanted to invite you here is because while you're not particularly aligned with respect to working in the public medical system in Grenada, you do have friends and colleagues in the medical establishment in Grenada, the public medical establishment, that is. How are they doing at this time?
Well, I think that the general consensus is that everyone is a little bit stretched thin now, and we're very overwhelmed. And I say we because I emphasize with them a lot. It is a difficult period in our history. I think we're making history now dealing with the cases we're dealing with. I think there's only record of us dealing with something like this in the past with the swine flu. And I think now it's a difficult experience, especially for young physicians who have never dealt with a pandemic like this before in Grenada. So I think generally, I speak for everyone when I say that we're going through it right now. It's a difficult time in terms of workload, in terms of finding comfort, in terms of rest, in terms of giving your best, as is always expected with healthcare workers. So I think everyone is a little bit stressed out and maxed out at the moment as well. So it is a difficult period for all of us.
And you made an interesting point about the young physicians, the young doctors, and some, shall we say, this is a new generation of physicians, right? Shall we call them the 21st century generation of physicians in Grenada? Would you say that their training prepared them for this?
Yes and no. I think theoretically we all have a lot of knowledge in terms of how to deal with it, but in terms of experience, we lack that experience. So now we have to get a lot of assistance, a lot more micromanagement from the older physicians who probably would have experienced similar things like these, who are a little bit more knowledgeable in terms of what to do. So I think in terms of reliance, we probably relying a lot more on the elderly physician. I know for myself, during the period of last year, I had to consult with many senior physicians as to what to do, what is the steps, how do I approach this situation, especially dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think, yes, theoretically, we know what to do, but experience wise, we haven't had much experience dealing with something like this. So it's something that we have to learn on our feet, which I'm quite sure we're competent to do.
One of the challenges with Grenada's public health system is the lack of resources. We're talking here not only physical resources, but we're talking about structural resources to be able to handle such a crisis as what is confronting the country at this time. I mean, we had a guest from Martinique two Sundays ago or 3 Sundays ago, in which they are struggling there with respect to their COVID spike. And I am reminded that Martinique has a much more robust healthcare system than Grenada. They have much more resources than
Yeah.
Grenada. So what would you say? How then do we mitigate against what we're experiencing now, given the limited resources that we have?
Yeah, I think it was difficult to plan ahead for something like this. I don't think anyone could have foresee us having a pandemic at this magnitude. So even in building the hospital and constructing the hospital, we catered for what would be probably the maximum input and hospitalization on an average basis, based on what we've seen from years before. So in terms of capacity wise, I don't think we had designed the hospital setting to handle this magnitude of persons that are falling ill with contagious diseases. To the best of my knowledge, the average ward probably holds about 24 patients. Um, and if we have 54 people who are COVID positive that needs hospitalization, you could already see that we maxed out the capacity of an entire ward. So I think going forward, what we'll have to do is to look for other means, which I think are already in the process to make COVID-19 days and so forth readily accessible for people, especially if we have more cases coming up. I know for sure there has been some restructuring in terms of the wards and so forth in the general hospital. So we're trying our best, given our limited resources. But I think if this continues, then we'll definitely need more space, more capacity, and not just physical resources. But we probably might have to get a lot more healthcare workers involved, and not just healthcare workers, but as you said, the auxiliary staff in terms of cleaning, in terms of sanitization, in terms of orderlies, etc. And obviously, we'll need a lot more equipment.
hmm and you talk about needing more bed space now in a situation where you say that obviously beds have been reserved for uh, the pandemic in Grenada at this time. But what happens in cases where other patients might need elective surgeries. All right, what happens in cases where patients would need emergency surgery when resources are stretched thin? What do we do at that point?
Yes, and that's a difficult decision to make. So what I've seen done before when we are stretched for resources in Grenada, what we do is we try to put off elective surgeries. And elective surgeries means that you can have this done. Sorry, you can have your surgeries done on a particular date, but it's not necessarily an emergency. So it's something that you can live with for a little bit longer without causing any serious complications to your life. So what we do is we try to suspend all elective surgeries and elective operations, and we try to focus on emergency situations. So I assume by now the theaters and even outpatient clinic might be either canceled or on a go slow, and we'll be dealing with emergency cases to the best of our capacity.
Now, you're in private practice. Have you seen a spike in patients coming to you as opposed to instead of having to seek medical attention at the hospital?
Yes, yes, very much so. So I run my private practice and it's called Medical Home Services. So I usually see patients at their home or in their hotel room, etc. And because of the stigma associated with the hospital, with having a lot of COVID cases, and you can't blame anyone for not want to be exposed to any environment that probably might have some COVID cases. I'm getting a lot more people who are interested in home visits. Not only that, because of the stretched capacity of the hospital, a lot of people are looking also into private services. So I do assist with St. Augustine Medical Hospitalization as well, and
Mhm,
I've seen an increase in the amount of people that are requiring healthcare from the private hospitals. And
mhm.
I'm not sure it's based on accessibility at the hospital or if it's based on a fear of being in an environment where they suspect that there's COVID-19 cases,
Mhm.
probably proximity on the ward, or even if it's just a misconception, the demand for private healthcare has increased.
Okay. Now, and this brings me to another question that surrounds the ethics of medicine, and that is something you've been trained about. Last week in St. George's, the Minister of Health, the public health authorities in Grenada announced the setting up of an ethics committee. Obviously, in Martinique and in other societies, that saw significant spikes in COVID cases, hospitals that were overwhelmed, they also made the decision with respect to how to treat with patients who uh, would have a fighting chance at life versus those patients based on their prognosis who may not make it, essentially. And so that decision has been made across the world during this period. Obviously, when it was made, the announcement was made in Grenada, it received a lot of public backlash from those who saying that the Minister of Health is not God, or that they're killing people up there. I've heard comments that the Minister of Health was trying to sell souls. That is the kind of superstitious talk that is making the rounds. But I have a question with respect to that ethical dilemma that physicians are supposed to face. What does your training tell you about making decisions in these situations?
To be honest, ethics committee is quite popular in a lot of hospitals. In most big hospitals, we do have ethics committee, and not only is it just to decide who lives and who dies, we deal with a lot of other ethical cases in terms of not just priority for resources, but in terms of abuse, in terms of next of kin, who's going to get the next of who's going to get the care, in terms of making decision, difficult decision between a parent and a child who's probably on
Hmm.
it can make decisions on their own. So it's quite popular. I think here our the training that we receive is obviously to do no harm. That's the first thing that we try to do. As a
Hmm.
physician, if we could help 100 people, we'll definitely try to help 100 and do some preventive medicine and try to help 150.
Hmm.
So the aim is always to help as much people as possible. I think as of now, because we're looking at the resources and we're looking at healthcare management, I think the question came up whether we should have an ethics committee, probably specifically for COVID. So
Hmm.
I know there's review boards within the general hospital that was already established. So I assume that this is strategically for the COVID situation. in this regard, I think the aim would always be for the physician to try and help as much people as possible. In terms of
Mm-hmm.
resources, there's a few things that they might consider in terms of if the resources are limited. If we have 10 ventilators and we have 50 people, how are we going to decide who goes? Whether it's going to be on first come, first serve basis, whether it's going to be that this person has a better prognosis or this person has a worse prognosis. So there's a lot of different factors that you have to take into consideration. If someone is, let's say, 99 years of age and they have 7 different comorbidities, and we know that even if we put them on a ventilator, we might extend their livelihood for probably 3 days versus the 18-year-old boy who comes in, and we know that if we put him on a ventilator, it probably might give him the average lifespan of a human being. Then these are decisions that we have to make, and it is not easy decisions. As I said,
Mm-hmm.
the general aim of the physician is to try and save everyone. But I think we're getting to the point now whereby the resources are stretched thin, and we'll probably have to make some very difficult decisions as to how we're allotting those resources. So I think in that
Mm-hmm.
regard, the ethics committee would probably be the best resort to help. And we need a community of people, and we need from different genres, etc. To help make these difficult decisions. So I think
And
it is.
to stick up in, please finish your point, and then I have a follow up.
Yeah. So I think it is necessary at this point. It's not a easy job, but I think it also has to do with delivery. The ethics committee does not only decide who lives and who dies. It's for various number of reasons. So I think if Grenadians bear that in mind, that listen, the resources are thin, and we need to find a way as to how we're going to prioritize care. I think that's a better way to express that. As I said, as any physician, and I can swear for all the physicians practicing at the general hospital, the aim is to save as much life as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think
Now, now, in the medical scientific community, uh, who constitutes the ethics committee? I suspect it's purely uh, 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 medical professionals. Yes.
and it varies. It varies. So you can have people who have behavioral background, experiences, and expertise. That is
Mm-hmm.
very high on the list. And you do also have physicians. You do also have nurses there on these committees. So it's sometimes it's multifaceted, multi-departments coming together to collaborate to make a board. And the aim is to get a fair and just view, and not just a biased view. So you try to have a fair amount of people there from different usually is from the same hospital but different departments, and they
Mm-hmm.
make up the ethical review board. And you might have someone from the outside as well
Mm-hmm.
to balance it out.
And Dr. George, I know that you have to go soon, but I have two final questions for you. The first question has to do with COVID treatment. I know that you said you have not treated many COVID patients in your private practice, but you've offered advice. Now, the treatment protocols for COVID has also been up for significant debate. There are the third-party treatments, if you shall we say, that that are also being touted as a sort of a prophylactic type medical care for COVID patients, versus what some might say would be sort of the conventional treatment options. As a physician, how do you go about making the decision to determine the best course of care? And would you, as a physician, take into account those other alternative, and some might call them alternative, those who are touting them may say that they're not alternative. But where do you go down on that line?
Right. So there is some conflicting researches based on some medications that are helpful. Some people are saying it's not helpful. Some researchers are saying it's helpful. It's not helpful. And that caused a lot of back and forth. So I could see why some people are pro some medication, and they're also against some medication. There also
But
are.
but Dr. George, how did we get here? Where science, I have a T-shirt that says science doesn't care what you believe. How did we get to the place where science is now viewed as somehow a religious persuasion, where either you go down on the side of being pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine, pro-ivermectin, anti-ivermectin? How did we get here? first of all?
Because I think people are asking a lot more questions now. So I think people are beginning to question, what am I taking, what is in my body, etc. And that is a good thing. And I also believe that people are now being exposed to a side of science that they did not see. Usually, the population is just exposed to the final results. But because COVID happened in such a very short time, we're going through the trial phases. So most drugs takes years and years before it's published on the market. And they do go through these things that is back and forth with the reviews and so forth, whereby you might have side effects, you may not have side effects. We have to pull this medication off the market and rigorous studies. So because COVID happened in such an abrupt time and the medication has to come out in such an abrupt time, there are conflicting results, as is with every medication that you do. So every new medication that you do, whether it's a vaccine or a medication, there would be rigorous trials and back and forth with it. So I think now people are seeing the different researches that says, oh, well, this is helpful, and they're seeing some researchers that say that this is not helpful. So usually with any medication, it takes a long time for us to get at least one big non-biased study to say that, yeah, this is the stance we're taking, or sometimes it's a collaboration of different researchers to say that it's more helpful. So I think because it's new, we're going to be seeing conflicting results for a bit. So we always have to err with first, do no harm. So does this provide benefits? So there's a series of medication that I think it may be helpful, it may not be helpful, but it wouldn't do no harm. So we're talking about the zinc, and we're talking about vitamin C and vitamin D, etc. Those have been shown to be pretty safe, and usually they're like multivitamins. So for me, I'll definitely recommend those. There's other medication that people are a little bit skeptical about, and I said the research varies. We do have research that's saying it's helpful, and some research that's saying it's just as if you didn't take anything at all, which is called a placebo effect. I can only speak for myself personally because I don't treat COVID patients directly. If I was in a situation, God forbid, if I knew COVID, I would try anything that I think would help me out without doing excessive damage to me. So that is the stance that I would take.
Okay, and that's a good point, Dr. George. The final question I have for you here has to do with um, cause of death, right? That is another narrative that has made the rounds on social media in Grenada this week. And that narrative has to do with determining the cause of the patient's death. The argument that some are making is that the Ministry of Health in Grenada, they're inflating COVID numbers, or they're not being accurate about some patients' cause of deaths, since some patients have underlying conditions. Now, can you tell us the science behind how cause of death is determined?
I think it won't be fair to answer that question because it will be misleading in this situation. I think in this situation, while someone may die from another underlying cause, so let's give an example. Let's say it's cardiac failure. I think when we report that the person died from COVID-19, it means that the person had cardiac failure. They also had COVID-19, and the decision has been made that without COVID, this person probably would have still been alive because the COVID is causing a lot more inflammation, a lot more stress on the body. So we're saying that if you minus COVID from the equation, this person had a really good prognosis of living before his body was placed under the stress of COVID. So I think in that aspect, that's why we have so much back and forth in terms of, oh, he died from asthma or he died from COVID-19. I think they're saying that this person did have asthma, but the person is young, let's say they're 28, and we're saying that without COVID-19 complicating his airway and probably causing a lot more additional stress on his breathing and so forth, he probably would have still survived regardless of if he has asthma. So I think cause of death in the medical realm, minus this pandemic, can be viewed as what really caused a person to lose their life. It's difficult to say that the virus itself killed you. It's more accurate to say the virus caused a lot more additional stress on your organs, and a particular organ gave up. So it would be recorded as COVID-19 related because of the additional stress the virus caused on your body that puts strain on your vital organs.
So it's sort of like that final death knell, if you will, right?
Yes, yes. So
Okay,
this caused the final nail in the coffin,
pretty
and I
much.
think
Yes. So
that's what is attempted to be communicated when we give the COVID report.
mhm, mhm. As a follow-up to that question, Dr. George, that has to do with just pronouncement of death. Obviously, the physicians are the ones who make pronouncement of death. Yes, and I understand. I only learned recently that there was a ritual involved in how physicians pronounce death. I never knew this until my best friend, Dr. Christopher, who is a physician as well. He's a resident in the state of Pennsylvania. He told me that it's not just as simple as pronouncing someone dead. So could you tell us what the process is in sort of a Cliff Notes version, what that looks like for physicians?
All right. So if you see someone is unresponsive, the first thing you do is to see if they will respond to verbal cues. So you could ask them, you call them by their name. If he doesn't respond, then you see if they respond to pain. And we have various techniques to do that. We could either squeeze on the shoulder, we could give them a sternal rub. Then you check the eyes, so you can see if the pupils are dilating or not. And then you have to check for breathing. And usually we check for breathing for 4 minutes or the heart rate, the heartbeat for 4 minutes as well. If there is no sign of life in terms of breathing, in terms of heart rate, if the pupils are non-reactive, then we could consider that person is probably no longer with us. After that, the procedure is after that you check for pacemakers, etc.
Okay. Any final thoughts? As background viewers and listeners, I initially contacted Dr. George to speak about a colleague of theirs that passed away, but obviously, given the circumstances under which that colleague passed, Dr. George would not be addressing the passing of their colleague, which a decision we respect. And obviously, we know that the different coping mechanisms to handle death. So we respect the decision, but we also want to take this time again to extend our condolences to the medical fraternity in Grenada on the passing of two physicians from the west coast of Grenada, and we want to extend our deepest condolences to them. So, Dr. George, before you leave us today, talk to us about just how we we can manage during this period outside of what the other safety protocols tell us: wash hands, social distance. And I say sometimes it's very difficult for someone who lives in a home that has a single family home with multiple people for them to social distance in that kind of situation. So, what other advice do you have? What other medical advice do you have to give to the Grenadian population at this time?
Yes, I think we need to take into consideration our culture and how friendly and sociable we are as a people. So I would
Hmm.
advise people, apart from hand sanitization and doing the 6 feet social distancing with strangers, that you might have to set some boundaries, and your boundaries are for you to respect. So in terms of friends, it's difficult to say who has COVID-19 and who doesn't have COVID-19. We have a lot of asymptomatic people walking around. We also have a few symptomatic people walking around, and we also have some irresponsible people who have symptoms of the COVID and are in denial, or they're scared for some reason and won't seek medical attention or even disclose that they have these symptoms. So we need to be more on guard in terms of setting our boundaries and limitation as to who have access to our personal space. So I noticed that if we good with the neighbors and we know this man for all the time, we might allow him to come over on the veranda and drop some potatoes and have a little bit of old talk with him,
Hmm.
and so forth. But I think what we need to do now is to set strict protocol for ourselves, just as we're seeing in the supermarket. You have to set up those things for your home as well. And it's not just about you; it's about the people that you're living with. There are people, and I'll say this clear: there are people who are vaccinated and they're still getting ill. That doesn't
Hmm.
mean don't take the vaccine. The statistics is showing that the severity of symptoms is much less when you take the vaccine. However, if you're vaccinated, it doesn't guarantee 100% protection from getting ill. So I think in terms of that regard, we still need to keep our guards up as high as possible until we get over
Hmm.
the pandemic.
And speaking of vaccines, which have become so polarized, not only in Grenada, but I think the politicization of vaccinations is a worldwide phenomenon. But I think it tends to be more acute in small societies like Grenada. Uh, what is your scientific recommendation with respect to the vaccinations?
I think that's a personal choice. I respect everyone's decision, those who choose to get vaccinated and those who don't choose to get vaccinated. However, I think once you're educated on what are the harms and the effects of either choices, then the choice is up to you. However, we are seeing a massive spike in the amount of people that are going out to get vaccinated, and I think that's a more responsible decision to do. Bearing in mind, there are some people who have complications and they also have comorbidities and they're a little bit cautious. So I think that one, you have to if you're concerned about your comorbidities, make the special effort to go and seek medical advice, probably from someone who's trustable and reliable, who could give you some ideas or even suggest whether it's a good idea for you or not. And I've been getting a few of those requests myself. Some I have time to address in detail, and some I really don't, to be honest. But I think people need to be a bit more responsible. COVID-19 is here. We've seen a spike in the number of hospitalization. We've seen a spike in the amount of deaths associated with COVID-19. We're saying that the vaccine is here. We have 2 vaccines available. We have also a lot of vaccination stations. The government is trying to get out there and do a lot more work in terms of getting the vaccine to you. So I think it would be in the best interest if you have no comorbidities. I know there's concerns about side effects from the vaccines as well. You could get those addressed, and you have to make the decision. I made a Facebook post recently, and it says that the most important point is that it decreases mortality if you're vaccinated. So in terms of if you think about just life and death, do I want to live? Do I want to die? You probably stand a higher chance of living a healthy lifestyle if you do get vaccinated and then you get COVID rather than you get COVID and you're not vaccinated.
But doctor, you talk about personal choice. There are tensions between the notion of personal choice and public health, the mandate of public health, which is the greatest benefit for the greatest good. And so when we think about the greatest benefit for the greatest good in the context of such a highly infectious disease such as COVID, societies are expected to have herd immunity. So how do you go down with that tension that says yes, you have a personal choice, but your personal choice affects the rest of society?
Yeah, I still believe in autonomy, and autonomy means that a person, once they're in the right capacity to make a decision, they decide what they want in their body and what they're going to take and what medical services they are going to accept and what they're not going to accept. It's just as if you try to save a patient who, let's say, is of the particular religion of Jehovah's Witness, and they say, "I don't want any blood." And you know that if I give this blood product, they have a higher possibility of living, but you have to respect their decision. I think the same thing has to be applied to COVID-19. That once people are competent enough to understand the information you're given, they know the risk that you're given, then the choice still is there. So if we're talking about mandating vaccination, I'm not a big believer in that. That's just my personal view. But I do believe in educating as much as you can. We need to listen to people's concern. A lot of these people have genuine concerns. It's not all the time that they read some bogus stuff or they watch some YouTube video and they decide. No, a lot of the people have comorbidities. A lot of people have read good researches that speaks out against. A lot of people have concerns about the side effects of vaccination. So I think we need to listen and educate to the best of our knowledge. And if at the end of the day someone chooses that, hey, I think this is not the best way forward for me and this is not what I want in my life, then I think we have to respect it to some level. To be honest, there is going to be a backlash. Let's say on the medical fraternity in terms of the hospitalization, stretching the resources, overworking of physicians. But it's a really tight decision to make. So I'm happy I'm not in the position to make any decisions like that right now.
Yeah, and Oliver Ben was asking, could Dr. George speak to the disposal of the body? I suspect here he's referencing patients who were found to have died from COVID-19.
Yeah, that question is not up my alley, to be honest. I don't think I
Yes,
can give.
I'm sure a pathologist might
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
better
I'm
person.
sorry, I can't address that question because I'm not knowledgeable about the entire process. I specifically do not work um with the public service.
Hmm.
I do partner with a lot of physicians who works there, and like last year during the pandemic, I went and volunteered when I had the little time. But I'm not involved in the day-to-day activities of the COVID-19.
Okay, let's get some final comments here, and then I'll allow you to leave because I know, given that, and then Dr. Christopher is here, I know how busy you physicians get. Patricia Bartholomew saying, "Thank you, Dr. George. Very valuable information dispensed. Hopefully, Dr. George, uh, Dr. Google, Dr. YouTube, and the Dr. Facebook will take a break today and listen to an actual medical professional." Reese Sam Mathlin is saying genuine concerns for hesitancy, very correct. And most people ignore the hesitancy, which makes one feel alone. Another commenter is saying, well said, not everyone that does not want the vaccine is an anti-vax person. Lincoln Depredine is saying, I think people need to be a little bit more responsible. There is enough information out there and visual evidence of the wrath of COVID-19 for Grenadian persons. I would correct you, Lincoln. It's Grenadian people and not persons. To know what to do. You're my friend, so I can afford to do that on air. And you're a journalist. You're also a journalist. It's people, not persons, plural. To know what to do and what not to do. Honestly, all this daily and weekly talk about COVID-19 is just covering the same ground. It has nothing to do with lack of education, opening or closing of airport or border, or ethics committee. Interesting point there about education, the point that you made, Dr. George, with respect to education. Bob Marish is saying, but Dr. George, what I'm seeing is that when you ask a question on COVID, you're likely to get a faith-based answer or a factual answer, or some people have no answers at all. The faith-based, we were hoping to have Pastor Stanford Simon here, but he's having some problems with logging in. Margaret Francis saying, according to both the WHO and the CDC, individuals who die from COVID can be buried or cremated as usual. Let's see here. Yep. So, Dr. George, any final comments? Thank you, Dr. George, for staying with us and for coming on today. Any final comments from you before we go to the next segment?
Yeah, I want to encourage everyone to make it their own responsibility to try and stay as safe as possible. Use the established protocols. They are not bulletproof. They're not 100 foolproof. But if we do them, the studies are showing that we could reduce the chances of catching COVID initially and even also the severity of symptoms. I do also want to express my condolences to everyone who has lost their loved ones throughout this last few weeks due to COVID-19. And I want to wish us the best in terms of dealing with this problem. I want to also take the time out to express my appreciation for everyone who is fighting this battle, whether it's an individual or whether it's someone who is working in a medical facility. So I know this time calls for a lot of personal commitment and a lot of personal sacrifices. So I commend that and I appreciate all of you.
Dr. George, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report. We would certainly want to invite you back to have more substantive and educational discussions such as these. I think it is important that we have some serendipity and we have some serious conversations around these topics. So thank you again, and you continue to stay safe, sir.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That was Dr. Mondo George. He's a private practice physician in Grenada. He was sharing some very pertinent and important knowledge here around COVID-19. Folks, we will take a break. Stand by. We'll be right back.
Are asymptomatic and you know you're fine, get vaccinated because that will help. That will help. You're going to stop this virus. We got to make sure it doesn't have another host to jump to. So if you're vaccinated, it'll be like, okay, and I can't go there. I can't go there. I can't go there. Well, I'm staying here. And in 14 days, I'm dead. Stop it. We can do this. We can do this. I have no doubt about it. But it takes all of us to do it. It takes all of us to believe it. It takes all of us. I cannot emphasize just this early morning. Vaccination, face mask, sanitize, education. And do not argue on little points. Vaccination works. You may not want to get vaccinated, well then keep your face mask on, but do not discourage the next person. It works, because I'm not telling the 87-year-old to go out and get vaccinated. I'm telling her, we're going to watch you. But that's somebody's grandmother who, if she gets worse and possibly dies, well, this household has now started to protect her because they know what to do. We got to work together. Nobody's trying to do something to not help. Everything helps. So let's not argue with each other. Please, let's not argue with each other. Let us work together. Everybody. Because COVID could care less. And what it likes is arguments. Because it's like, okay, I can jump there. When you spread apart, I got it. We're at a war. And a war is only as strong as your front defense. So give your front defense. Give your front defense. Everything. Get vaccinated. Wear the face mask. But I believe, God, that we are going to get through this. The toll is watching the families who call me and say, I'm being told that my family member is going to die in the hospital and I can't see them. I cannot even imagine how that feels, but we can't. That's the toll. That's the toll. It is sad. It is sad. One death is sad. I'm sorry. I don't care. One death is sad. And if you're saying, well, you're being optimistic, one death is too many. With one death is too many, no matter what. So I'm not going to try to say, well,
And welcome back, folks. As a programming update, we're having some difficulties with reaching Pastor Stanford Simon, not for a lack of trying. He's having some challenges with logging into our broadcast platform. And so I want to take this time to welcome Mr. Randall Robinson. Mr. Randall Robinson, you are here in your private capacity and in your personal capacity. We need to make that disclaimer made, but how are you doing? How are you doing? How is your family doing during this weekend lockdown period?
So far, so good. I mean, we're all here. We have experienced this lockdown before, so I think we're ready for it. Everybody is safe, thank God for that. And yeah, we're managing.
And that's what we can do. Mr. Robinson, again, thank you for agreeing to appear on the Bubb Report. And so we want you to just reflect on what has been happening in Grenada over the last week. We felt that while it's important to have an expert panel, this is the way that this program is set up. It's also important to get a sort of on the ground view of things. First of all, how did we get here? How did we get to this point in Grenada?
Kalon, my personal view. When I heard of case number 170, it was a lady. She was returning to the US, I believe, and she tested positive before she left. She came in, she was negative. No, she was fully vaccinated, and so spent 48 hours in quarantine. As a matter of fact, I believe in her case, she got out of quarantine even sooner than that. In all experiences, airports, because of, a lot of people pass through airports, areas that can cause infection. Yes, just by their very nature. Once we change that protocol from 7 days to 2 days, and knowing that that vaccinated people can become infected and spread disease, we were inviting trouble. And I think we got a glimpse of it with case number 170. Now, what should have happened after that, in my opinion, Kelon, and I would like you to call me Randall, is that we should have shut everything down then. And by that I mean, this was a week before carnival-like activities. Yeah. And those activities that were organized for vaccinated people, case number 170 should have clued us in to the fact that we could have had vaccinated people spreading infection. And therefore, once we got into those spaces, these fetes or parties for vaccinated people, we are inviting trouble. And we did not shut it down. So we allowed 2 events to happen. And then, of course, the unvaccinated decided, well, if you're all going to make that happen, we're going to get out there. Not realizing, of course, that case number 170, and I'm not just blaming that case, I'm saying that case was a signal that there may have been others like her who went out into the community, and so we may have had community spread. And of course, once you had those 2 events happen, and then of course everybody went out on the street to play mass, that was good. It was just going to explode. And as I said it, so it has happened. And I do not understand the reluctance up to today to put all visitors to Grenada or all returnees to Grenada in a 7-day quarantine. For the life of me, I do not understand it. I do not understand it. Now, we have community spread, but I think we still need to shore up the borders with a 7-day quarantine. And I think most people are of that view. But and we have to deal with what is happening now. Thankfully, we are a small population, and I believe that the infections may crest. I'm not a medical expert in any way, but a lot of people have got. You remember chikungunya and what it did to us, and in the short time that it spread throughout Grenada. I expect this might be the same kind of thing happening, because remember, most people congregate into St. George's, or the St. George area. So they come from all over the island. And of course, once it started, it broke out in the different areas. It was getting on the bus. And remember, once you have COVID, COVID moves with you. COVID moves with you. So once you move in, COVID is on the move. And so we have seen now an explosion of cases. There are a lot of people who are sick, of course, not being tested. Some people are just remaining at home because they can't get through on the phone lines and all that kind of thing. And I mean, almost every business has been touched by COVID. I mean, some people are resilient and they're able to still open and so on. Thankfully so. But even the same supermarkets and so on that are open have really had to, manage their resources very well. And so because they too have staff who have come down with COVID, and you could understand, exactly.
And let me stick a pin there, and I'm going to quiz you here on the notion of folks in the community who have COVID. They've been either diagnosed positive or they've not made themselves available to be tested, but they are presenting with symptoms.
Right.
We have received on our WhatsApp several stories overnight, for example, of people, whether they work in nursing homes, whether they work in different private businesses, who are presenting with COVID symptoms, but because there is also a factor of stigma here and discrimination, right? That people don't want people to know that they have COVID, and so they would go about their lives as normal, right? What are your thoughts on the idea that that exercise of vigilance is not necessarily really enforced?
But Kellan is just crazy. I mean, I don't understand. I understand the stigma, and at the same time, I don't understand the stigma. Because I mean, let's face it, COVID has infected how many? You have what, 2 billion people? the world over. It's like a cold. You will get over it. It's, you know, it's you will either get over it or you will be sick for a long time, and in some cases, some people will die, right? And we have seen it coming. Why would you be hiding the fact that you have COVID? I mean, you know, you ought to be able to look. I'm positive. You know, in my experience, Kellon, I have friends who have said to me that they're COVID positive, right? Yeah, kind of whispering, you know, but they have said so. So I understand that, I guess, if you have become infected, that, you know, you feel a kind of way. And I think it's a personal thing, you know, because COVID causes one to really, you know, I have this thing and it has killed a lot of people, and so I need to be really careful. And so you're caught in this kind of, in this space where you don't really want to come out and say that, yes, because, you know, people might feel a kind of way. But I think if it is that you come out and you say, look, keep away, you know, I'm infected with COVID, or I have COVID, or whatever the case might be. I have not seen people shunning anybody who has COVID. What I see is that there's a lot of care that people are expressed. You know, I keep calling my friends, I check on them to see what's happening with them. And I think most of us have reacted in the same way: care, concern, love, support, you know. So, and I don't see people shying away from that. So, you know, that is my experience. It may be different for other people, but so I really can't see why, you know, people are hiding that. And it is better that your people around you know, so that you can take the actions that are necessary to mitigate or to stop the spread from me to anybody else, you know. Interestingly, Doc, I'll tell you this.
Yes.
A doctor, so I have a friend who is a doctor as well. So he had to deal with one of those cases, you know. So a lady came in and she was positive, and she was with friends. Now they took a bus to come into town, tested positive, and so on. So he says to her, look, you're positive, you need to go home and isolate, right? 3 hours later, he's finished his shift and he's driving through town, and she's in front of KFC with a mask down below her nose, you understand? So she did not go home. She was in town and went into a business place and so on, not properly masked. Where he said he wanted to come out of his car and give her a clout. Now, you could understand how people feel, right? Because you're trying to stem this thing, and some people don't even understand that you really need to be responsible, because for the very reason that COVID-19 for some people can be a death sentence. For some people, 2% it may be a death sentence. 6% people get really, really sick. 14.5% of people who contract COVID get sick, I mean symptomatic, you know, and a lot of them have long haul COVID. This is not something that you want to be playing with, and people seem not to get it.
Yeah, no, you make a point. You make a point, and personal responsibility goes both ways. And let me say this, right? On the one hand, yes, citizens have a right to critique the government for their perceptions around how they handled this pandemic, which I believe the government of Grenada did a very good job up to this point, right? In keeping the community spread at bay. We have to be honest about that reality. But at the same time, citizens ought to also take some level of personal responsibility. But I'm going to get to some comments. Hey, Kyle Griffith is saying, but the government is guided by the directives from WHO and PAHO on the quarantine requirements. It is consistent across the region. It's not like the government arbitrarily made up the quarantine requirement. So cut them a little slack in that regard, Randall. Your thoughts?
Kellon, we have to deal with the reality of the situation. You know, the reality is, you know, why we were able to keep COVID at bay in Grenada because we had a 7-day quarantine, because people were tested after 5 days, right? Because it takes 5 days. And I mean, let's assume that you are traveling. You know, I was in Trinidad because I had to have eye surgery, and I was in Trinidad for the last 5 months. You know, five months. I happened to be there from February to July, right? And Kellon, I have a very good doctor friend in Trinidad. When she was here, when she heard that I was traveling on the set at Miranda, I do not want you to travel. I mean, so, but I was insisting I had to come home. I mean, I had had enough. I was there away from the family for 5 months. She said, you are to wear 2 masks. You are to wear a face shield. You are to protect yourself, because airports are high risk areas, and flying is high risk. So we know this. The physicians know this. We were able to keep Grenadians safe because we had a 7-day quarantine, right? And once we realized that vaccinated people can become infected and spread COVID, we should have continued with our 7-day. That worked for us. The 2-day quarantine caused us problems, and it can continue to cause us problems. And that's just my opinion, and I'm looking at the reality of the situation. I will give the government kudos. They got blows early, they made some mistakes, but we were able to get it under control. And we have lost control because of 2 days of quarantine now. I think we need to gain back control. Eventually, we will settle what is happening locally, because, you know, that will play out, but we need to keep any more infections coming in at bay. And that's just how I see it.
Of course, the island is still under a state of emergency declaration. I think most countries in the international community who are experiencing this pandemic emergency also have these emergency declarations in place. What are your thoughts on the emergency powers? The most recent one, of course, that has been gazetted.
Yes. Well, Kellon, we are in the midst of a pandemic, and sometimes you have to make really serious decisions that would affect people's lives and so on. You are allowed to do that under a state of emergency. We have been able to, you know, people have been saying, oh, we really don't have an emergency and so on. And we haven't had one really for the last few months and so, but no, seriously, we have we have a health emergency. And we have to try to get people to be responsible. And I think for the most part, Grenadians have been responsible. However, there have been some times when we have been irresponsible, and the authorities have to be able to have that, to have the leeway to be able to deal with those to keep all of us safe. So if some people are behaving badly and will put us at risk, then the authorities must have the ability to be able to mitigate and to minimize that threat. They can do that with the state of emergency and the emergency powers that they have under that. Once they don't abuse it, and I have not seen any incidents of abuse, so you know, I can't argue with the regulations as I see them now.
That's an interesting. So let's get to some other comments here. Andrea is saying 2-day quarantine began since May 1st. I keep asking, what was vaxxed visitor arrivals like? How many fully vaxxed tested positive upon departure? And was there a spike over the last few months since the 2-day quarantine began? Wilbur Thomas is saying, Randall, are you saying that because the person was unvaccinated, they spread the virus? How can you say case 170 did not contract the virus during their time on the island? I think it's time we move past the finger pointing. The reality is COVID is here, and we need to come to move past this for both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Your thoughts?
Well, that's what I have been saying. I'm not pointing any fingers, you know. I'm saying that case number 170 told us something. It revealed to us that vaccinated people, right, can can become infected and spread disease. That's what that said to us. Once we recognize that that happened, and I am not about to determine, where it was picked up or whatever as the case might be. I'm saying that before case 170, and I mean, Kelon, let us be honest with ourselves. There were a number of activities that took place where, people got together in large groups and so on, and there was no spread. There was no spread, so we could have concluded. Look at what happened around Christmas and then into the New Year, and even for independence celebrations and all of that. People got together and they were linemen all about and so on, and there was no breakout in the community. But I am saying that when we saw 170, it said to us, hello, we might have a problem here. So let us shut down everything, because the lady was in different places. She indicated that there was contact tracing going on. And so I'm saying beyond that, we had an opportunity to be able to keep that contained. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm pointing any finger at any individual. No, I'm saying that this told us something and we could have acted on it. So certain things that happened should not have happened, and we should have, done the contact tracing, kept everybody quiet for a while, and minimized if there was spread, if she was able to, or if there was any kind of community spread from other individuals. Because all it said to us is that vaccinated people can carry the disease, can spread the disease to other people. That's what it said to me. I was not on the individual. So let's calm it down. Let's not have any of these activities. Let's look and see if anybody has been affected. And let's deal with it right now and go back to 7 days. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Mr. Robinson, here we have some other questions here that are coming in from our WhatsApp service here. Someone is saying that there was no spike in COVID in Grenada until August.
Yeah, right. Right before. Yes, that is true. We didn't really have the spike. Yeah.
Correct, but the quarantine procedures were changed several months before that, right? No, the 2-day quarantine period. I have to go back.
Somebody saying May, but I don't think so. I think it was later than May.
Right. That 2-day, I believe they announced that perhaps in either July or
July. It was maybe around
June,
July.
Maybe June. I'm not. I have to go back into the record.
It was late June.
I want to be as accurate as possible.
Yes, I believe it was very late June or early July, because certainly, remember, I came back to Grenada from Trinidad on the 1st of July. And because I was unvaccinated at that point in time, I had to go into quarantine for 7 days. But yes, the regulations changed, I think, just about a week before that. And then, so this is what it is, and then we started having an influx of people. So I guess we have to start to look at when that came into being, and then when we had the influx of people coming in, the vaccinated people and the unvaccinated, and so on, and look at it as it progressed. But I'm saying that the signal for me about whether we should continue with that 2-day was after what happened with case number 170. And that's all I'm saying,
All right, Mr. Robinson, we have to get to the next segment, but where do we go from here? How I did ask about family and friends, but the death toll is significant. It's jarring. It's harrowing. It's sad. We lost several public servants in the last week, right? The same experience in Martinique. Martinique lost some prominent people in the civil society space, and the same thing is happening in Grenada as well. That does not portend well for the national community.
Well, and Kelowna, based on the numbers that we are seeing, we are in terms of mortality, a 1%, 1.2% range, which is which is good. if you understand where I'm coming from, because the international average is 2%, and so it's good now, but I'm worried because we still have quite a number of people who, are in hospitals, and there are a lot of people who, because they can't get through to hotlines and all that kind of thing, are staying at home, and not reporting and so on, because you for yourself said that you were getting some WhatsApp messages about that, and I'm hearing the same talk here. People are reaching out, and so they are fighting it on their own. And sometimes, and you see, the thing is that the way this disease progresses, by the time you really start to worry about not being able to breathe, it's kind of late, When you get to the hospital, there isn't much that they can do for you. So really, if it is that you're beginning to see signs that are worrisome, folks, you have to, if you can't reach somebody, so you have to make as if you could get to some sort of medical intervention as soon as possible. Because if you get there too late, it's just too late, and that's really unfortunate. And Kelon, I just want to say to our medical folks, everybody on the front line, regardless of whether you are medical personnel or support medical personnel in whatever way, and to all the volunteers who are outside there helping, at this point in time, you have a task ahead of you, but I want you all to know that we continue praying for you, we continue to support you, we continue to really root for you, because we know that they're going to be tired. There's a lot going on with you, and they are the ones who are going to be seeing the deaths and having to deal with it in Okelon. And we really have to worry about how this affects our doctors and our nurses mentally when when this begins to happen. And so we have to continue to hold them up, not just in prayer, but reach out. If you're a friend, reach out to them, talk to them, encourage them. Let them know that you're outside there, and that you really care about what it is you're doing. And so that is what we want to encourage. And as a passing note, I just want to say that tonight I organized just a little concert. I sing, so I have the music that we could share, just to raise spirits and so on. So we're going to be doing something with Rita Augustine and with Chris Julian, myself, Tamara Songbird, and Aixa Migwen, our violinist. And we're going to be doing something between 8 and 9. It'll probably go a little later than 9 tonight, for our frontline workers, and for the families who have suffered loss during this time. So we want to just kind of help to raise their spirits a little bit and know that, we have their back.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that there is a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. There is a lot of Facebook punditry that public servants in the medical establishment get from the national community, regardless of what side you come under, and that is very demoralizing. It's extremely difficult to function in the public health system in Grenada as it is. And so to be Monday morning quarterbacking and to be saying, well, the health workers line, and the health workers this, that, and the third, I don't think that's helpful either. But let's get to some final comments, and we'll get to the next segment. I see we have Miss Colleen Batiste and Mr. Herman Hall waiting in the wind in backstage. So thank you guys for staying. A viewer says people in Grenada were relaxed because there was no outbreak like this. It is our first, and it is inevitable. To think we would be able to stay in that bubble forever is unrealistic. I see Mr. Robinson nodding there. Randall, he said, call him Randall. Brian says, preaching the gospel on this blessed Sunday, Randall Robinson. Wilmer is saying the approach with this COVID situation has not been handled properly in the first case worldwide. Now, the pressing focus is on vaccinated versus unvaccinated. We have become very hostile and unkind to humanity in many ways. In that regard, nothing effective is being achieved. Look at the situation now. Last year, without vaccinated people, and now that is so many have been vaccinated, we are still in a critical crisis state. I cannot figure out what is really going on. Lincoln is saying breakout doesn't happen today for tomorrow. Too many believed COVID wouldn't come to Grenada. Also, too many believed COVID was actually a hoax. There's still who believe it's a hoax. That is a narrative that permeates some aspects of Grenadian society. Jonathan Bain is saying we did not know of any spreads because there was no testing of citizens being done. What are your thoughts on that? Testing.
No, I believe there was testing being done. There was testing being done, and there's no denying that. But of course, we have to be also reasonable. Um, tests tests are costly, and it kind of short supply for us. Even now, you have to kind of ration it because if somebody comes in now, given the number of tests that we have, I don't know that we have 100,000, 200,000 tests. To make the best use of it, if somebody is symptomatic, then you might want to make sure of that so that you know what it is you're doing. However, it seems we have received quite a bit, and we have testing stations all over the island. Even now, there's neighborhood testing going on. You can leave your house and go there if you're going to be tested, or if you're going for medical treatment. You can do that now. So the authorities have ramped up, and there is testing. Testing is available, but testing was available a long time. Also, vaccines were available a long time. Now, I don't want to get into the vaccine non-vaccinated debate. I am pro-vaccine. I believe that they have shown great efficacy, and they can help you survive COVID. But if you don't want to take it, as the doctor said, that is on you. And we have to respect people's choices. Whether you like it or you don't like it, that's a choice, and you really have to deal with it. But I would encourage, if it is that you really want to help, go get vaccinated if you don't have a problem. Do that. And the funny thing is, Kellon, coming down to this last, we had vaccines available since early. We were keeping COVID at bay, and we had vaccines available, and we were talking to people, look, go and get a vaccine. A lot of people say it was inevitable that COVID was going to come, and we believe that. You're seeing it all around you. When your neighbor house is on fire, you have to try to wet yours. And so people should have availed themselves of the vaccines. They didn't, and now we're in this situation, and you're running at the last minute. The other thing now is that we're discovering we probably need to be testing more people before we give them vaccines, because if you get vaccines while you have COVID, or you're infected with COVID, you might have longer symptoms, right? So that is the reality that we have to face now. This is what my doctor people are telling me, that I don't know that is necessarily happening as much as we would like it to happen, but people want to be safe and to have the vaccines, and we have to facilitate that. So we're here, but you know what, Kellon, I think that the situation is going to be really better in about a month. I think we would have, we may have, we have a high run of infections now. Soon we're going to have a lot of people who are vaccinated. I believe over 40,000 people are vaccinated already, whether it be one vaccine or so. I think it's 19,000 with two and 28,000 with one. So you have to add them together, because, if you have 28 and 19, that's like 48,000. So we're looking at 40% of our people vaccinated at this point, which is really good. We're going in the right direction. And a lot of people who would have been infected and would have gotten better would have natural immunity now going forward. So we have to add those figures together. So I don't believe that this is going to be with us forever and ever. Amen. When I'm saying that, in terms of, this, what we're seeing now with overwhelming the health situation, fingers crossed, I figure that by Christmas we may have gotten over the worst of it, and and we can contain what is happening beyond that. Fingers crossed.
All right, Randall Robinson, thank you again. Again, you here in your personal capacity. I wish to make that very clear. You're not representing the political organization to which you are aligned, and we certainly thank you. And obviously, the producers made the recommendation to have a citizen's view of this, and your name come up in our meeting this week. So we thank you for agreeing to appear.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And to all of you out there, stay safe. Please stay safe.
Absolutely. Operative word, staying safe. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Have a good one. All right, folks, stand by. We would go to our second segment break and come back with our last two panelists for the show. Stand by.
1838, we were freed. And on the basis of that freedom, we were left with nothing. We got nothing, and we are still trying to move past this. That is how I see emancipation. And I would just like to say that as African descendants, we have come so far in terms of what we created. Because as I said, when we were emancipated, we got nothing. And in terms of reparations, firstly, I would like to say that the information around reparations is so misunderstood, because when you ask certain people what is reparations, they tend to say it is Caribbean countries begging for money from people who already died, and they tend to say that enslavers are no longer with us, and so on and so on. But the root of reparations comes from Latin, and it means reparate, which means to change and to reform and to transform and to reverse. It means to make amends for crimes that were committed against us. So that is the way I see reparations. And in terms of what my school has given to me and how it shapes my identity, firstly, I would like to say that my father is Black and my mother is Indo-Caribbean. And I struggled with the identity of who I am and what I was and so on. But then I had an amazing history teacher in Form 3, and then I have a next amazing history teacher in MCC, and they created this sense of pride.
Dr. Ray, may your soul rest in peace. One of my most fond memories of Dr. Ray was one morning I decided to run away from the General Hospital. Yes, ran away from the General Hospital to grab me some double cheese pastry at one of the restaurants close to St. George's. On my return, I was greeted with Dr. Ray, with my son in his arms. I was so amazed that Dr. Ray actually went beyond the call of duty and performed fatherly duties to my son, which I'm forever grateful for. I would like to say that Dr. Ray was a very humble human being, very soft-spoken, very respectable. And I would like to say, rest in peace, Dr. Ray. You have done us well.
On behalf of AJCSS President Association, gives me great pleasure receiving from the Federal Landai who is normally obtaining two precious gifts, scientific calculators, to be used by the students and students of the school. God bless them. Great scientists in everybody. Frontline, Isaac Newton, which I bless them.
Just ordinary guys.
That's so cute.
Dog, Uncle Jojo. Come on, fix that little finger. Dog. Dog for Uncle Jojo. Dog. Keep it straight. Dog.
Welcome back, folks. That was a tribute to some of the souls. Excuse me one second.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not favorable? You don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean. If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm gonna live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? You said. All right, welcome back, folks. I lost my composure there for a second. I usually am composed, but this was a very difficult week for Grenada. So I want to welcome Mr. Herman Hall and Colleen Batiste, my good friend. Lady and gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Colleen, I will start with you. You're over there in England. What time is it in England at the time?
Now. It's 5:40 p.m. in the afternoon.
Okay, it's 5:40. And thank you for taking the time. We were trying to find someone. Obviously, the medical establishment in Grenada is shook. We have a number of COVID positive cases in the medical establishment. We also had some deaths last week as well. And so, Colin, I wanted to start with you. Young Darville Ray, he was one of those Grenadians who decided to return to Grenada to serve his country. But you knew him on a personal basis as a cousin. So tell us more about Darville.
So first of all, thank you for having me, Kellon, and hello to everyone who's listening, all the viewers who are going to watch this on the replay and who are watching this live, and also to the panelists who were here earlier. Kellon, it's really difficult. You hear people speaking about my cousin. I know him as Darville, and everyone knows him as Dr. Ray. So based on the outpouring of support for him, you can tell the type of person that he was. There is no one who can say a bad word about him. He was one of the most loving, selfless, generous individuals. And this is ever since he was a child. He's always been like that. He has the most gentle soul. So speaking about him in past tense is incredibly difficult because he is supposed to still be here. And it's one of those things where I feel like if I should not even have to be having this conversation right now, and having this conversation makes me livid. It makes me livid. Yeah. So I have to remain composed about it because he's a young guy just starting out in his life. You're just starting off in your medical career. This is it. You have the whole world ahead of you. And you don't expect to get a phone call from his sister saying he's gone because this is something that, oh, wait, hang on a second. There's no warning. You're not even, do you know what I mean? So you're completely caught off guard. And what we're experiencing is the straw that's breaking the camel's back. So we're going to call a thing a thing. COVID is the straw that's breaking the camel's back. And it's where it highlights how much of a reactive society we are. Because we're a reactive society. We always play catch up when it comes to everything. We're playing catch up. This is what we do. We're good at this. If it's one thing we're consistent at, it's playing catch up. We can do this all day. So with my cousin, if you listen to the people who speak about him, you get a clear picture of the pressure he was under. Not just himself, but the rest of the frontline workers are under immense pressure. And this is not an isolated incident. This is not a two-day thing. This has been something that's been brewing. It's a storm that's been brewing for a very long time because 2017, my sister, who was a nurse, basically, I'm trying to see if I can get the words to describe this without like losing my composure as well. So in 2017, my sister is now a nurse in the general hospital for over 2 decades, and she gets diagnosed with cancer as well. So she collapsed at work. She had to then take sick leave and go through a whole bunch of tests. So when she was in the hospital being on the treatment, I remember meeting Davil on the ward because Davil had now returned back from medical school, him and my other cousin, Ziza Phillip, and they're now actually working. So now they're in the system as well. And I remember him being there for my sister who was now dying. And I said to him, and I remember vividly because I can see myself looking at him. This is in 2017, mind you. So this is before the pandemic. This is before COVID. I said to him, Davil, don't stay here. These people do not deserve you. They're not going to treat you well because I'm speaking from what I'm seeing my sister going through. And mind you, you see her colleagues came together for her. So when it comes to the medical community, the fraternity, they will come together to help their colleagues. But the system which they're working under, it's a beast. That system is a beast. It chews them up and it spits them out. This is the nicest way for me to say this on a program. It chews them up and it spits them out, right? Sometimes it even spit out their bones. Because I'm looking at my sister's colleagues, they would come and look for her. Sometimes they limp in. I'm talking about nurses, doctors. You can see some of them even like sick, but they're on call, they're on duty, they're working. But you can start seeing, and we know this is not, as I mentioned, a today thing. So we know that the culture that our people have been groomed into, where you're supposed to suffer in silence, don't complain, don't say too much, because what happens is we tend to punish people if they speak out or if they seem to be, basically we say complaining. So we tend to punish them for that. So everyone's suffering in silence. So I saw David and I said to him, I don't want to see you go through something like this. Unbeknownst to me, in 2021, he's not here. So it's difficult to even try to wrap my head around this because I feel like if Kellan, like I'm seeing him in 2017 and I'm telling him, Davel, boy, do what you have to do and see if you can leave this place, because I'm being selfish now. I'm being selfish. I'm like, I don't want to see you end up as my sister. Get out of here.
And Colleen, one of the things a lot of Grenadians who return do that for love of country, and of course we stick a pin. We will come back and have a discussion around love of country. But Mr. Hall, thank you for staying with us and being so patient. We finally
No
were able to
problem.
adjust
I enjoy the show.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And by the way, viewers and listeners, Herman Hall is the publisher of the very popular Everybody's Magazine. I read Everybody's Magazine as a child. So it's such a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Hall. You are a veteran magazine publisher in the Grenadian expat community. So we thank you for coming on. But speaking of love of country, Mr. Hall, Brother George Wilson was someone who loved Grenada daily through education at the secondary level. One of the things about Brother George Wilson and about Shaper School in general is that it offered access to a secondary school education to Grenadian children who otherwise were not able to attend other secondary schools on the island. So can you speak to his approach to ensuring that every child who came to the school had an opportunity to get an education at Shaper?
Yeah, of course. I would say that George Wilson was a true patriot of Grenada. You know, a lot of people come to Grenada or to live in Grenada, and they just try to reap the resources of the country. This is all of us, I'm included. But I would want to describe Brother George. He was not a politician, but he was a true patriot. But before I continue, may I extend my sympathy to his family, his wife, who I met last January while I was at the school, in January of 2020, and to all the other victims of this horrible pandemic named COVID. And my sympathy, and I do hope that everyone in Grenada is taking more and more care of themselves as those of us who are outside of Grenada are trying to take care of ourselves. In terms of Brother George Wilson, I have to speak to him about him in a different context, because most of the viewers and listeners who are looking at the program may have known Brother George maybe in the 1990s, in the 21st century, even in the 1980s. But the Brother George I knew was a different Brother George. He was one of my students. And we have to look at Brother George and others in that context. He was one of the founding students or original student body at what we now call Schaefer School. And we're about the same age. He could have been slightly older, I may have been slightly older than him. And the school gave people like Brother George an opportunity, and he in turn gave Grenada, shared what he learned. He passed on that opportunity that the school gave him, the Shapers gave him, to other Grenadians. But going back, we have to look at him in the 60s. Now, we have the St. John's Christian Secondary School, and it is a Bukyang. It is a 19th century Bukyang. That Bukyang may have been built since in the 18th century, perhaps renovated during the days of Fedo, and there's perhaps just continuously being renovated in the early 20th century. So when the Shapers acquired the school with limited resources, it was just a pure Bukyang. If you visit there, you will smell the cocoa, you will smell the nutmegs and everything. But to bring students, the original students there, it needed a little paint, and there was maybe limited resources, and the Shapers were able to use the resources of Grenadians, whether they were from Victoria and Guelph, because we have to look at it. This is the 1960s. Many people we saw linemen in Victoria, linemen in Guelph. It's not that they deliberately were linemen. There was just no opportunity. But people had that talent and that ability to recruit people. So Brother George was not recruited there as a student, actually. He was actually...
Correct. And in doing my research, before you go into the painter story, it was interesting to learn about Brother George's history with Shaper School, right? He was one of those that the Shapers recruited, as you said, to support. So now could you tell us more about that painter story? Because I think that is a very, very fascinating story.
Yes, young Grenadians of today would not, and when we use the word painting, there was some sort of cheap material. It was called whitewash, I think. It was very cheap. And so Reverend Shaper recruited, people in Guelph, Victoria, because this was the area near to Brothers, to help. But they too saw an opportunity, and Brother George was one of the people who was painting or whitewashing. But eventually the paint or the whitewash finished, and they, especially Brother George, he wanted to learn, because you remember when you left primary school in those days, there was really nothing for you if you couldn't travel or if you did not have that opportunity to go to secondary school. And so he saw that opportunity, and what Reverend Shaper did, during classes, the people who were working, if they were interested, they could join the class and stay in the back or sit in the back of the classroom. And Brother George was one of them. But he was not that old as one named Jones. Jones, as I speak to you, was someone from Victoria, and he was much older. He may have been in his 20s, but he was eager, and he actually joined in, I think it was 66. So, but he was a friend of George Wilson. But George Wilson, as I said, was much younger. So George Wilson wanted to be part of the school as a painter, and then, as I said, he was of that age where he could have been in a class, and so he became a student, and he was one of my students. So again, that is in the context, I know, of Brother George. Now, I left in 67, and he was still a student, because we did not yet do the GCE. I prepared the GCE in history. And in mentioning that, Brother George also, as I recall, was very respectful to me. We will always talk. We were friends outside, but in the classroom, he treated me as a teacher. And I remember when we had the play, A Day in West Indian History, based on the life of Julian Feddo. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Brother George was in the play. He was in the cast. Then came the early 70s. He left Grenada, and I think where he went to study, I think it was in California to further his education and so forth. And then briefly, we met in New York. He visited me, and that was the early 70s. So this is the Brother George I knew, who was, without people like Brother George, they may not have been at school today. But the viewers, they would have known Brother George as a headmaster, and then when he retired as a farmer. So, and this was the Brother George I know, by listening and following it up out of New York. So when I hooked up with him recently, I was wondering if he was sleeping, because every night, maybe every 3-4 minutes, there is this from WhatsApp messages. And I said, how this man could be answering those questions? People from all over, former students from all parts of the world, they are texting him, WhatsApping him, whatever, and he will be just instantly responding. So Brother George, in my estimation, was basically a founding member, founding teacher, founding student, a founding non-student, because he was there before, of the school. So just as how we may hold the Shapers and Miss Brown, the early missionaries in high esteem, I put Brother George on the local level in that bracket. That was his contribution. And privately, yesterday when I heard the news, I was shook up, and I plan to speak to the headmistress, because I would love to do something in honor of Brother George. As a private citizen, I'm not going to say what I'm going to do, but I would love to sustain his memory in that school, and I'm hoping to speak to the headmistress. Now, the reason I think, Dr. Bubb, is why I'm on your show. Wendell Diriggs, who put me on to you, and he was saying he was too emotional, and as well as other students who knew him, that they were just too emotional to come on. So for me, I'm not as emotional, because as I said, I go back with him in the 60s. His loss is not only a loss to the St. John's Christian Secondary School, but it's a loss to education in Grenada.
In Grenada, yes.
Grenada as a whole.
Yeah, I do remember. I remember I never met Brother George. Just as a backstory, my paternal family comes from Guelph. So my grandmother was born on the lands in Guelph. My grandaunt Mabel Williams, some may know her. She was also my grandaunt who lived in Guelph. And I remember I had an aunt who passed common entrance. At that time, they called it scholarship. I believe it was in the 70s, before independence. And she was unable to get into the St. Joseph's Convent in St. George's, just because they were only accepting certain kids in there, and they didn't have space at the school. And so my grandmother always spoke in glowing terms about the fact that it was Brother George who was able to accept her daughter into Shaper School because of that relationship that they cultivated in Guelph, right, as children. So I just thought I would put that anecdote out there. But I'm going to bring back Colleen here. And of course, Mr. Hall, I want you to be a part of this conversation too. And that has to do with how do we pay respect to our public servants. Our public servants do yeoman's work on behalf of the people in Grenada. And there is a feeling that somehow the work that you do, you also worked in the public service in the Customs and Excise Department. And there's a feeling that sometimes public servants don't necessarily get the just reward when they're alive, certainly. Your thoughts, Colin, and I will get to Mr. Hall.
In Caroline, it's very difficult to even try to explain like the treatment of public servants, because it goes deep than just the fact that, you know, what we're witnessing right now. It's deeper than that. Okay, we have been groomed to see working hard and struggle like a badge of honor. So when you groom us to see struggle like a badge of honor, and we're supposed to see hard work as something that we need to strive to be hard workers in this 21st century, it's very problematic, because we're not supposed to be working hard anymore. We need to be working smart. Many of the problems we're seeing, it's basically, how should I put this? It's like, it's inside the policies in the civil service. It has to do with the structure. It has to do with management. It has to do with lots of things. So it's not just the fact that, you know, okay, well, we want people to be hard workers and get a work. You know how we have this tendency to be like, you leave school and you get a good work. But the job itself, do we have anything in place to help people protect their mental health? Do we integrate self-care? Any strategies in the workplace? Do we have self-care strategies at school? Do we start this from the home? Do we have this mentality where we're thinking about wellness, mindfulness? Are we already starting to promote those things? Because it's not just about getting a work. You know, you finish school, CXC results will be in October, and another group of children will be waiting for the results so they could say, I have 12 subjects, 13 subjects, you understand? But what happens when you go into the workplace? What happens after that? Because you're just going to be going through the pipeline again as the ones that came before you. And bear in mind, we're here and we're highlighting an icon like Brother George. Brother George's era, we don't have those days anymore, Kellon. The days with Brother George, times have changed, because now we're seeing more pressure on people, with some of us not even living to Brother George's age. Let's just be real. Many of us are not going to live to Brother George's age. That is, it's like we're seeing people dropping down now in their 30s, in their 20s, in their 40s, right? We're not even seeing people reaching retirement age. And another thing, when you do reach retirement age, you're stressed out because you have no pension to get. So we have to understand that the side of the coin where people are saying this person is a hard worker, they're selfless, they're loving, they're generous. You know the other side of that coin? The other side of that coin is you get exploited, you get used, you tend to be given the like mediocre service, because it's like, we know you're going to work and you're going to stay back late. We know you're going to go above and beyond. You hear this term a bit. They like to go above and beyond, and it's celebrated. He goes above and beyond. But what is the repercussions? The ripple effect is you have a lot of people right now suffering in silence and struggling, but they don't want to say anything or ask for help. Because remember, again, we see resilience as something that we need to celebrate. Oh, you're strong. And who's caring for the carers? Who's taking care of the people who are taking care of us? Because I can speak from, like, say, spend 10 years in the civil service, and that is nothing compared to the healthcare sector. So that's why today I can speak for my cousin and I can speak for my sister, because I witnessed what they went through in the healthcare sector. That's a whole nother kettle of fish. And this is why even now with COVID happening, we can't wait to react, or after we have to be seeing so much rest in peace. Like, everyone's timeline is flooded right now with condolences. Everyone's timeline is flooded, but that's something that's been brewing. And what we need to do now is start to think, okay, no more reaction. We need to be more proactive. We need to be more proactive. So what happens next? What are we doing? We had a mass exodus of public servants, healthcare workers. Have those positions been filled? And this is a genuine question. I'm actually asking this question. If anyone knows the answer, let me know. All the nurses we lost, have we filled their positions, or are we expecting the remaining workers to shoulder the burden of an increased workload? And that's a genuine question. Do we even know the statistics? Okay, say for example, we lost, say, 15 nurses last year. Did we have 15 replacements? What's happening now on the wards? who's taking care of the people that were probably under their care prior to them leaving? And then on top of that, are we taking care of the ones there? Like what measures do we have in place for the workers who are still there right now? Because it's all well and good to say, well, it's a pandemic, but no, that's human beings. These are people who get to have to go home and have to deal with their family life after. Because when you leave a work shift, when you're stretched to the limit, then you have to go home and do your laundry, cook for your family, do homework. On top of that, you're already struggling because you have all this fear and anxiety. That's a ticking time bomb, and that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for disaster. So the number one thing that's happening right now, we see, is the stress that's affecting people, because stress will manifest itself into disease. And this is what's happening. The stress is manifesting itself into disease. It's affecting health, brain, and it's affecting body. It's affecting many different things right now. So what do we do? Is it too late for us to try to see if we can get ahead of this? What's taking place right now for the people of Grenada? What are the safety nets that's there for them, especially the healthcare workers?
Mr. Hall?
Yeah, and I think the question was about legacy, how you can preserve the memory of Grenadians or past. First, recognize the fact.
But even before memory, it's also about giving people their flowers when they are alive, right? We shouldn't have to wait until they die, and then we have. And granted, yes, it's also important to pay people, pay tribute to people in death, but about ensuring that that level of respect is given when people are alive.
Yeah, well, that's quite true in life. I mean, in any society you go, you will say the same thing. But when it comes to, again, the legacy, we have to face the fact that Grenada is one of the few countries, especially in the Caribbean, we do not have any national heroes. Now, of course, everybody's going to say, what are you saying? In other words, we do not have any official as legislated by government or any source say, these are our national heroes, a list of national heroes. We have people we know, we agree that they are national heroes, like Julian Feddo or T.A. Marichaud or E.M. Gary. But in the sense that history has not been very, very big in Grenada. And if you do not recognize your national heroes, you really cannot go forth. I mean, a couple of years back, we had Everybody's Caribbean magazine did a special edition.
Herman, I would just fact check you. I believe the government recently named Sir Eric Gary as the first national hero. So I just thought I needed to fact check that.
Well,
yes, but
thank
please
you.
Proceed. Yes.
So that's the first. But boy, right? But what some islands they have a committee where the national heroes are nominated and their monuments or whatever. And we know there's a monument for E.M. Gary. But T.A. Marichaud, what about Julian Feddo, the man who changed the face of Grenada? It was a revolution. It was not a rebellion. It was a revolution that changed Grenada. And it was about quite a number of ladies, the Rowleys in the 1940s and 1950s, the women. So, there is no organized sense. There is no National Heroes Day in Grenada. Most islands, St. Vincent, Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and so forth, they all have National Heroes Day. So as long as we do not create some sort of institution to celebrate the people who have contributed to our history, our generation and future generation will not recognize those who are living because there is not that sense of history.
I don't think they recognize them now.
Huh?
I don't even think they recognize them now.
Right. And the few who try to do, well, history is my love. I mean, since I was at the Shapers School. So that's, before doing Grenada history, that's my hobby. I mean, I spend 3, 4, 5 a.m. on mornings researching Grenada's history. But the point is this, that getting back to Brother George, and like Dr. Ray, now when I saw his image, I felt it right now, because here was a young person, a young person who dedicated his life to Grenada. And here is a person who unfortunately passed on, someone who was at the, who was not, to me, was not yet even at the peak of his life. Here is a contribute. But again, we have to recognize those who have came before us, and we have to sometimes forget the politics. And, some of Grenada's national heroes are more in high esteem abroad than Grenada of itself. How many people have seen a photo, for example, with T.A. Marichaud and Winston Churchill? What a great man was T.A. Marichaud, Selby Donovan. These are people who laid the foundation of what Grenada is today. And of course, the symbolic of all of them was E.M. Gary also, like Feddo, who actually led revolutions, who changed there were two basically revolutionary leaders in Grenada, which is Eric Gary, because he transformed the country. Then before that, Julian Feddo, and then after, of course, the revolution with Maurice Bishop, where the country was actually changed. But we have to just, recognize we have to look at what the other countries are doing. We must have some form, not the government or whoever saying you are a hero. There should be a place in the cemetery where their remains are, and so forth. But with the exception of Julian Feddo, we never found his remains. We never know where he died, where he went, what happened to him. So, but if we do not understand or we do not appreciate our local history, then there is really no future much. It will be the same problem we'll be encountering year after year. Because when you look at it well, even though I don't want to get into the politics of it all, you may ask yourself the question in 2021, what did the revolution in 1979 did for us? I mean, of course it did a lot of things, but what did we learn when you see where Grenada is today? So to me, history, people, you must understand your past, as some of the philosophers have said, to understand the present and to create the future.
Correct. And so on that note, we want to get some closing comments from both you and Mr. Hall. Colin, I'm going to start with you with some closing comments for the program today.
Just to piggyback off what Mr. Hall said,
yes.
He mentioned that we don't celebrate our heroes. We don't even have national heroes. Now, there's this saying that goes around that says, never forget where you came from, right? But we tend to attach images of poverty and struggle to that saying. So you see the saying, never forget where you came from. But we tend to be like, yeah, so it's like it's a way to humble you. It's a very sneaky way to humble people, and says never forget where you came from. And we attach a Janet House, we attach somebody basically living in abject poverty to those images, instead of saying never forget where you came from and attach images of greatness, images of our people being inventors, astrologers, people who build the pyramids, or people who basically build this world. We don't tend to attach greatness to that phrase or that saying. So it's understandable why we don't have national heroes, because we do not see ourselves in the light where we need to celebrate our people. We do not cherish our people. We do not treat our people like the kings and queens that they are. We like to look at ourselves from the lens of colonialism, the colonial times where we see in trouble, and we glamorize and we normalize struggle and poverty. And there's nothing normal about poverty. And we need to end this narrative where we think overworking is something that's a badge of honor. This is not a badge of honor to be overworking yourself, to be burnt out. We need to stop the burnout culture, because we have a burnt out culture that we tend to celebrate. Like, we think it's something good to be, oh, you're tired all the time. There's no glory in that. And then we tend to always feel like if we like to put people in their place, bring them down a peg. Whenever we see someone trying to uplift themselves or elevate themselves, we like to knock them down a bit. Oh, where you going? Get back down here. Here is where you're from. Stay at the bottom. Stay down here on our level where we can see you and trample you. So of course we're not going to have national heroes because we're not in the habit of celebrating our people. Hence the reason why we have so many young people right now suffering. And I'm here, and I should not even be on this program today speaking about my cousin because he was not a martyr. And I want to make sure we don't ever make him look like if he was a martyr. He didn't give his life. He was supposed to still be here and be alive and enjoy himself and be with his siblings and his family and his cousins and everyone. But we like to do that to our people, run them into the ground, then turn them into martyrs and be like, oh, they worked so hard. Then 8 days later, you forget about them. So that's what we need to remember, that we have to celebrate people so that we don't need to have these conversations and paying tributes to young people. But at the end of the day, Kellon, the only things that's going to bring a change is a shift in our mindset. That's where we need to start.
And I see Mr. Hall is smiling here.
Yeah. No, we took the word from the lady in London, from Colin, because I was just saying you have to change the mindset, and she said it. For example, let us take Kirani James. What a great hero he is. Not only to Grenada, do you know the amount of people worldwide who admire Kirani James?
Mm-hmm.
How many Jamaicans were all excited for Kirani James? Okay, we know Kirani James. Now here is a contrast I'd like to make, and I'm not trying to push or promote anything. The current issue of the magazine has a Grenada model on the cover, a Grenada model. And there are 14 models and designers in the magazine on Grenada, special. And do you know what I got from this week? A representative from the Grenada Hotel Association delete his name from our email list because the magazine is not relevant to him. And here was an issue with Grenadian. So I'm not criticizing the person is free. We got the person email because the person sent us an email from the Grenada Hotel Association. This is how. But the point I'm trying, using that as an example, we never hear it an opportunity where we are presenting 14 designers and models, plus the young ladies on the cover. She's going to be representing Grenada, I think, in the World Performing Arts in Denver or in Las Vegas. I think in October with COVID, we do not know if it's going to change it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But here again, here you have a local person saying, I don't want to get this publication, remove me from my email, remove my name. But so that is, we don't appreciate our own, and only when we make it or when we die, then we recognize the person.
Oh yes.
Colleen, you're saying, oh yes. Go ahead. I want to give you a chance to engage the last point.
He hit the nail on the head, Kellon. We love to wait until someone else celebrates our people, then we jump on the bandwagon. That's what we do. We would look at our own people. We will never celebrate them the way they should be celebrated. But when they die, it's outpouring of love and affection. Give them their flowers now. Recognize them now. Treat them with respect now. Have respect for them when you see them, because we tend to have this false sense of community. It's a lie, because it doesn't extend to everyone. It extends to people who we think, oh, I'm going to like you, because it comes with terms and conditions. We have this culture where we wait until you make it big somewhere else, and then I know him. And all of a sudden now we want to be able to say, this person's been doing good, but that person's been in our country for a long time trying to put out their craft, put out their skill, but we never give them the celebration that they're supposed to get. We never do that. That's why I would say to you publicly, Kellon Bubb, thank you for this program. Thank you for what you're doing, because you need your flowers now. You're one of the people who for years have been educating and informing and empowering many of us. And I will say thank you to you for that. Eddie Frederick again, every Thursday at 3 p.m., Eddie Frederick is out here motivating us. Every Thursday, Eddie Frederick is out here motivating. There's so many people who are doing what they can in their corner. They're brightening the little corner where they are. right? And they're trying and they've been trying, but we wait until they get international recognition, and then all of a sudden we want to put them up on a pedestal. Give them their flowers now. Have respect for them now. And that's why we shouldn't wait until it's too late and react, because we are a reactive society.
Lady and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today under some very difficult circumstances, under some very difficult conditions. But we here at the Bubb Report, we fundamentally believe in properly memorializing people who serve Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique in whatever capacity. That is important. So, Mr. Hall, I will be in touch with you, sir. I'm glad I have your contact because I am in the process of publishing my first book, and I need to be using you as a valuable source of research, sir.
Okay. You're welcome. And I have to say that I do know, but that's from many, many years ago, over 50 years ago, some of your relatives involved.
Yes.
Just in hindsight, as we live, let us take yesterday, 9/11, the world over sort of remembers what happened. And in some, I was looking at some of the papers in the region where they paid tribute to their people who perished. And I want to say that there were two Grenadians who perished. One was Winston Grant. I think he was from St. Paul's, and then one was Touche from St. David's. Winston Grant, I think I briefly went to school with at the GBSS. The Latouche guy I never met, but yet when I met him at the World Trade Center, and it was so touching because he was one of the first to go. And this guy had so much vision for Grenada. I was at the World Trade Center, Windows of the World, at some corporate luncheon, and he was the maitre d'. And it was a high-end, this was the Windows of the World, and he was there supervising. And I realized he was Grenadian, and we started to speak. And this man wanted to come to open a top-star restaurant in Grenada. He had 3 jobs. All he was saying in the conversation about he coming back to Grenada to contribute to Grenada, whether it was in the restaurant industry and I think in the automobile industry. So yesterday was 9/11, as we said, and I just wanted to recognize these 2 Grenadians who really were dedicated, and they had both had planned to return to Grenada to participate in nation building, not as many people like me who remain on the outside, but they had all that ambition, and 9/11 prevented them from returning home to participate in nation building.
All right, Mr. Hall, thank you for that history lesson. And viewers and listeners, let me thank you for joining us today for this COVID edition of the Bubb Report, also this edition of the Bubb Report where we remembered some of the Grenadian public servants and sons and daughters of the soil who passed last week. And of course, on behalf of the entire production team here at the Bubb Report, we will continue to do our part to uplift the conversation, to really ensure that we're having critical conversations that are a level that is mature and that is a level that is educational to our people. So thank you on behalf of the entire production team of the Bubb Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kellan Bubb. Do have a safe and productive week ahead.